Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. Thanks for coming back, and welcome to my special guest today, who's Elisabeth Kristof. Hi, Elisabeth.
Hi. Hi. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah, so she is coming in from Austin, Texas, a little bit far from me in Edinburgh, Scotland, but there is no distance online. So that's wonderful to see you and wonderful to meet you and reading a little bit about your background. So let's start with giving our audience here, who are just the public. Lots of them have got pain. Lots of them are looking for solutions. The name of the show is the 21st Century Pain Solutions. And I believe what you're up to in your work with applied neurology to chronic pain and other domains is really one of the futures for our audience, because there are no limits online. We can reach every country in the world and thousands and millions of people through this platform. And I'm just can't wait to get into this little chat with you about what you do, how you got here, and how you're going to change the world. So let's start at the beginning.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And I do hope that this provides some tools for people that they can use to get some relief if they're feeling stuck in their pain or stuck in life in a way that they just are unable to move through, that there's another way to start to look at some of this, to shift the perspective a little bit. And I am the founder of a platform called Brain-Based Wellness, and it's a virtual platform where we train the nervous system. We intentionally train the nervous system, which is really your operating system. And we train it to heal different deficits that you might have in your nervous system. And we find new tools for self-regulation that you can use to move out of states of chronic stress and to help your body come into a more calm and respond state. And how I got there was, I've been a movement practitioner. That's my background. I've been a movement practitioner most of my life. I started my first business when I was 24 years old, and I had a couple Pilates studios here in Austin. And in 2015, we were starting to develop our national teacher training program. And at that time, I had done enough research into movement science to understand that brain science was going to be at the forefront of that. I knew enough to understand, like, you don't have a tight hip flexor. You have a brain that is telling your hip flexor to maintain a certain amount of tension because it doesn't feel safe letting you make big movements. And so I knew that, like, you can foam roll it all you want, you can stretch it out all you want, but unless you change that neural pathway, unless you change the state of your brain's functioning to make it feel safer, you're just going to keep recreating that same pattern over and over again. And so I found an institute in Arizona called Z Health Education and began studying applied or functional neurology. And all that means, it's a big word and not a lot of folks are familiar with it. It's not a very known field, but all we're really doing is training the different input systems to your nervous system, like your visual system, like the balance system in your inner ear, your body mapping system, the system inside of you that tells your brain what's going on inside of your body, your interoceptive system. So we train all of those systems to function better with intentional neural exercises, simple, easy to use, practical exercises that you can use on a daily basis, just like you would train your muscles in the gym to be stronger and more resilient. You're just training your nervous system that way. And so I began studying that and using applied neurology for athletic performance and to help people move out of pain. And that's really how I got started in the field of applied neurology. And then at a few years later, in 2018, I experienced a period of really high stress in my own life. I had to dissolve my partnership shares in the business that I had had for 12 years. And that was my identity. It was my community. It was my whole life had gone into that business. And so I was really kind of lost and had a lot of emotions coming up from that. And then the very same week I dissolved my partnership shares, my romantic partner at the time was diagnosed with a rare cancer around his heart. And I went into being a full-time caretaker for him. And I just lost all sense of safety in my life. It always felt like maybe the floor was going to fall out from underneath me. And I started to experience a lot of really severe outputs of my own nervous system. I would get so tired that I could not even make it to bed. I would just kind of pass out in the hallway. My binge eating got really bad. I've had binge eating my whole life. I was in a lot of pain, a lot of radiating pain in my body. I had really bad panic attacks. Sometimes I would be driving to my new job and just have to pull over and like throw up into my Starbucks cup. And I had all of this happening. And then I also had all of this background of applied neurology and really understanding how the nervous system works. And I began to see in myself the signs of dysregulation that I looked for in my clients before I would experience these unwanted outputs, before I would have a binge, before I would have an anxiety attack. And I began to start to understand my nervous system was talking to me and it was really dysregulated, and that these outputs were coming from the dysregulation in my nervous system, and that I understood the tools to heal that. And I also saw what was going on with him. He had a lot of childhood trauma. I have autoimmune disease. I also have a lot of childhood trauma that started coming back to me in that high stress time. And I just got really curious. Why is this happening to us? Why do I have autoimmune? Why did he develop cancer? We're healthy people. We didn't drink, we ate well, we exercised. And I started to learn all about how high ACE scores, adverse childhood experience, can lead to trauma held in your body, can create a disease state for inflammation, for pain, for unwanted behavior. And I really took a deep dive into studying different somatic healing, into studying different ways of processing emotions through the body, and then started really applying functional neurology to a much broader scope, not just to athletic performance, but I realized there are much bigger implications for this work of healing the nervous system, that you can move out of unwanted behaviors. You can use it to help resolve trauma. You can use it to move out of chronic pain, and you can use it to heal it at a much deeper level. And that's when I created the business and the platform that I have now to help people use these neural exercises for all of those reasons.
Wow. Well, not only are you doing it, but you've lived it. You know, and
I certainly have.
I think when we've got the life experience along with the training and the curiosity, because I think that's key, then we can really jump forward and understand and empathize with our clients and what they've suffered, and therefore help them more effectively. So yeah, my heart goes out to you for what you've had to go through. And I know we all have trauma at different levels. We all have suffering. We all have struggles. We have all got pain of one sort or another. But as you know, the body heals. The body heals. The body keeps the score, as Bessel van der Kolk talked about in his book, famous book. But also the body heals. And that's the business that you're describing in sort of scientific terms with applied neurology. So let's dive into that. You know, our audience maybe not understand what that means. So what does it mean on a practical level? So maybe give us an example of maybe a client you've had, and you've worked with them, and how you've used these techniques to get them to a more further down the path, and maybe not healed or completely resolved issues, but way down the path of understanding and therefore action with this.
Yeah. So applied neurology at the most basic level is taking the latest in brain science and using those studies to break it down into really practical neural exercises that you can do daily to either train your nervous system to be more resilient, to change some of the wiring, to upregulate certain nerves that need more activation and calm down other nerves that are hyperactive, and or to use in the moment of stress. When you start to feel those signals of stress, how can I give my nervous system some stimulation that it needs so that I can help it along to regulate itself and to come out of that state of chronic stress that, as we talked about, can be really dangerous. And so from an applied neurology perspective, one really important thing to remember is that our brain's primary job is our survival. And it is always deciding safe or unsafe. Everything, it takes in information from all these different input systems, your eyes, your vestibular system, the balance system in your inner ear, your body mapping system, and it generates this picture of you and of the world around you. And it then uses that information, it integrates it, and then it generates an output. And that output is what is based on the decision, safe or unsafe. And if our brain feels unsafe, our old brain, not our cognitive, not our prefrontal cortex, but our autonomic nervous system, if it feels unsafe, it's going to generate a protective output. And that output could look like anything from binge eating for self-regulation to pain. Pain is a great protective output of the brain. If you're in pain, you're going to take smaller steps. You're not going to work out with as much intensity. You might even go lay down in your bedroom, pull the covers over your head, block out all of the stimulus. And in that moment, that is safer because your brain doesn't feel safe. And so it needs less input, less stress, less stimulus coming in. So brain is another protective output of your brain when it makes the interpretation unsafe. It could also be a migraine. It could be heaviness, chronic fatigue. It could be anything that gets you to reduce the amount of stimulus coming in and keep you safe for that moment. So what I'm ultimately trying to do is give people practical tools, practical training exercises that will help their brain feel safer, so that they can move out of those protective responses into more of a performance way of being, so that they can stay in their body, they can feel present, connected, alive, they can make decisions from their frontal lobe, from their higher order thinking systems, and move out of some of the behaviors that, while they were serving a purpose in that moment to keep them safe, maybe don't align with their long-term goals or with their ultimate health goals over time. And so how do we make our brain feel safe so that we don't have to engage in those behaviors anymore?
Yeah, I think one thing that has really struck home with me on this subject is how that automatic response is always going on at a level of safety. And we're not thinking about it. It can actually be measured before the thing happens, which is a bit odd and weird, but it's true. I think it's the amygdala in the brain is so fast at avoiding danger, threat, death, that people end up having these patterns. And I love what you said and how you went through all the different, not only diseases, but like migraines or chronic fatigue or chronic pain, but also just behavioral stuff like crying for no reason or not going to work for no reason. But there is a reason.
Yeah.
It's way back there in the past and embedded in their history, in their childhood, or even their infancy, or even in their fetal life. It can be a program. And how this is the source of what we see in chronic diseases in our world, in our medical system. This is the cause. Way back.
Way back. Yeah.
Really needs to be shared loud and clear across all domains, because until we address this, and you mentioned the ACEs, and I think it was 98. Was it 1998 it came out?
I believe that's right. Yeah, Dr. Vincent Folletti with the ACE score study. And I think what you're saying is so important, because it's that shift in perspective to really understanding that our body and our system is trying to keep us safe. It's not working against us. And it can feel so frustrating when you're stuck in these behaviors, or when you're stuck in a loop of pain and you can't understand where it's coming from. You don't have an acute injury, but it's just this migrating chronic pain, and you try all this stuff to get out of it, and it gets really, really frustrating and really painful at an emotional level. And I remember for me, there was a moment where, for me, one of my biggest outputs is binge eating. I've been a binge eater since I was a little kid. I had a lot of trauma at an early age, and that was the way that my body learned to regulate me, to actually shift me out of fight and flight response, sympathetic nervous system overdrive, into rest and digest, calm and respond. When I ate a bunch of food, it gave my vagus nerve a bunch of stimulus, which is this really important cranial nerve that is a key player in your interoceptive system, the system that tells your brain what's going on inside of your body. I realized that all this time eating a bunch of food was actually helping my nervous system move out of a state of chronic stress, because it gave my brain and certain important nerves the stimulus that they needed to regulate and to get the activation that they needed. And I really had this moment in doing all of my research where I was overwhelmed with gratitude that my system, that my body knew how to do that. And even though it felt painful at that time, I also, we briefly touched on ACE scores, but I learned that adverse childhood experiences dysregulate the nervous system, and we can stay stuck in that state of too much threat, too much sympathetic nervous system drive. And then we have all of these stress hormones pumping out all of the time. Cortisol, which, as you know, can damage our vessels, it can damage the nerves and lead to a more diseased state inside of the body, where we're more prone to inflammation, where we develop issues with our immune system. And my body intuitively knew, you can't stay here indefinitely. You can't stay here for so long. What can we do to bring you out of this state? And so that was the behavior that my brain learned. I would push past pain. I trained as an athlete. I would push past exhaustion working on my business, because I was dysregulated and a perfectionist and type A and all that kind of stuff. But a binge would shut me down, and it would get me to rest, and it would create enough calm in my body to have a little bit of repairing, a little bit of recovery. And I really believe it kept me from getting really, really sick until I was at a place where I could look at and resolve my processed emotions, where I could give myself new tools to regulate, where I learned new ways to give my body the safety that it needed. But until then, it worked. And I was grateful to my body for protecting me.
That's an amazing awareness, amazing story. And it's must be new for people listening to this today, to think that the issues that they've got is actually the body saying, enough, no to this,
Yeah.
no to the unresolved, maybe even the unknown stress that allows it to come up. How long did it take you from your awareness to a place where you could say, yeah, I'm well on the path of recovery?
I think it was when I started, it's honestly, it's an ongoing process. Like, there's still moments where another layer comes up and I face those behaviors, and I have to learn, I go to a deeper level of my subconscious mind, and new memories, new emotions come up, and I can sometimes get re-triggered into my trauma. But I feel like I'm at a place now where I have a strong beam. When I fall off, I have a beam that I can get back to. I have tools that I can use. And there's longer periods of time between emotional flashbacks, between the unwanted behavior, between experiencing the pain. And when it does occur, I have this past experience now that I know, like, I can move through this. This isn't going to last forever. This is just a signal from my body, and I have the things that I need to deal with it, and I can process through it better. But I think all of that really started for me when I started reading books like The Body Keeps the Score and Waking the Tiger and Complex PTSD by Peter Walker. And I started to understand myself differently, to feel really seen, and to recognize myself in those books. And that was when my relationship to the pain, my relationship to the binge eating, my relationship to myself changed, and I was able to have more compassion and more curiosity. And it wasn't until I could have that compassion and curiosity that I could start learning how to move through it.
I loved the call several weeks ago with my colleague, and I think it's Amarillo in California, and he shared something very similar, and how it's meeting the patient, meeting the client on that journey, because we're all in a journey, and the journey never ends. It ends when we close our eyes and we take our last breath. It never ends, and this trauma never goes away. And the pain maybe never goes away in one level because it's always at a deeper level. And it is about getting into ourself and discovering who we are and allowing the process with the tools. Let's talk about some tools. Some people are listening tonight. I'm sure. Well, what are the tools? What are the tools, Elisabeth? Talk to us about those.
So the first tools that I start working with people with are tools to just really help us regulate our system. And when I say regulate our system, I just mean that, our nervous system kind of oscillates between these different states of arousal and then coming down out of that state of arousal into rest and digest, calm and respond. And we don't ever really want to be stuck in one or the other, right? We want to be able to move between those and have the appropriate amount of nervous system activation for whatever the task at hand is, right? So if I'm going to go exercise, I do want a little bit of sympathetic nervous system activation. If I want to rest and recover, then I need to come down out of that state. And so the most important baseline is giving people tools to help them self-regulate so that they can be so that they don't get stuck in one of those chronic states. And so we focus a lot on things to upregulate the vagus nerve, which is cranial nerve 10, runs from your brainstem all the way down into your pelvis. And it gives your brain a lot of the signals about what is going on inside of your body, what's happening in your organs, what's happening with your respiration. And our brain thinks that information is really important to make those predictions and generate an output to keep you alive. But our vagus nerve can get damaged with chronic stress. It can get damaged with trauma. And so healing that and being able to not only heal that, but to make it function better so that we can better read the signals from inside of our body is a really important starting place. And a very simple example of an exercise would be tongue circles. So our vagus nerve innervates at the back of the tongue. And so tongue movements can be really good ways to start to give the vagus nerve some activation. So I just have my clients sit up nice and tall, relax their shoulders. You can close your eyes or keep them open if you want to, whatever feels better for you. And then just take your tongue over your teeth, behind your lips, keeping the mouth closed, and just make some big circles. Trying to go a little bit further back with the tongue each time, relaxing, maybe slowing the exhalations down, nice gentle inhale and a long relaxed exhale, and then maybe go the other direction, maybe 5 circles in each direction with nice easy respiration, making the circle a little bit bigger every time, very even, smooth circles. And then pause, take a breath in, take an exhale, just kind of let that settle into the body. And then just reassess how you feel. Does it feel a little calmer? Maybe sometimes people's vocal tone even drops because they have less tension in their throat. And it's just a really quick, simple, easy way to, when you're starting to feel signs of threat, racing heart, sweaty palms, tightening up in your throat, tension between the eyes, dry mouth, you can just do something very simple to give yourself some tools for regulation. So we start with a lot of vagus nerve drills. We start with a lot of respiration training because our breathing mechanics are really important. If each of our breaths can be more efficient, then that's a lot less stress on the nervous system every day. And so I don't mean breath work, but I mean like actually training the respiration muscles and the nerves that innervate the diaphragm and stuff like that to breathe better with more efficiency. And then we move on to training the different input systems, your eyes, your balance system in your inner ear, and just, again, doing really practical exercises that help you identify and find the deficits in your own nervous system. Maybe your right eye doesn't function as well as your left. And so we need to strengthen the muscles around that particular eye or train those visual skills, and helping people to identify their unique deficits and then come up with exercises that they can use daily to make those systems function better, so that as a whole, their nervous system is giving better quality input into the brain. And then the brain feels safer on a second by second basis, doing its primary job, which is making predictions to keep you alive.
Brilliant. Love it. Absolutely. Simple is best. And by going back to do these simple things over and over and over again, they just become part of your routine and your day. And therefore you're constantly improving this dysregulation.
Yeah, I think, I start with very small amounts for people because they're already stressed out. They're already overwhelmed. So one of the things we focus on is starting with a minimum effective dose, a morning practice or a daily practice of just 3 minutes a day, one respiration drill, one drill for your vagus nerve, and maybe 1 minute just dropping from your head into your body and seeing how many signals you can read. What does it feel like in the bottom of your belly? What does it feel like in your chest? What does it feel like in your throat? And just get better at starting to read the signals that your body is sending you. And for some people with a lot of trauma who've been dissociated for a long time, maybe that isn't even safe. So maybe you combine it with a little bit of sensory stimulus, or you keep it at just 30 seconds. And we're always finding ways to make these things safe. And then over time, yes, you add more, the drills get more complicated, you layer them on top of each other. So you're giving your brain lots of new input. And then we move on to emotional processing and neurosomatic movement. But even with emotional processing, you have to feel safe first. And it can be really threatening to your body to release these emotions that it's been holding on to for a long time. And maybe at a very early age, you learned that it is not safe to express your emotions, that you'll be punished, that you'll be abandoned, that you'll be rejected, that you'll be seen as weak. And so that deep core wound is in there. And then you try to let yourself express your anger or release your grief, but we don't feel safe yet doing it. And so when I started to do a lot of these somatic practices like EFT tapping or even like page purging and letting some of these old emotions out, I experienced pretty severe autoimmune reaction. My joints would start to swell. I would get eczema. I would get migraines. And I realized I'm not making this safe yet for my body. And so I started combining it with the applied neurology. I do some vagus nerve stimulus to bring myself into a nice calm state. Then I do the emotional processing. And then after that, just like I would with a hard exercise, like a hard physical exercise, I re-regulate with some neuro drills so that I'm continuously teaching my body and my system it is safe to express this emotion. I can create that physiological state inside of myself after doing it that is calm and relaxed. And the more I do that, the safer I get and the more wired in that felt sense of safety becomes in releasing my emotions and processing through that so that I don't have to push myself into dysregulation to do the work of healing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Amazing. Really, really amazing.
It's been life-changing for me, for sure, because there was so much there and I just couldn't get it out. I couldn't get it out safely without having to then suffer physical consequences. And then those emotions stay in there, those held emotions, and that drains so much energy and it leads to more dysregulation. And then we experience periods of intense emotional flashbacks or outbursts of those emotions because we've been holding them so tight for so long. And then something happens that doesn't seem like that big a deal. Maybe somebody just sets their keys down in a certain way that triggers that old feeling, or somebody says a certain thing, or, is texting instead of paying attention in the conversation with me. And I feel like that 3-year-old again, experiencing those really big emotions that are disproportionate to what's going on, but I can't stop it because I haven't been able to process through it.
Wow. What are the kind of give us some examples of the problems people have when they work with you and the end results that you're seeing with them?
So people come to me for a couple different reasons. Usually one is pain. They're in a lot of pain, or they're experiencing migraines or just burnout. A lot of entrepreneurs that want to be visible in their business. They want to grow their vision, but they also don't want to keep sacrificing their quality of life in order to do that. And they keep pushing through these signals of their body. And then they'll do something like a launch or build something in their business, and then they're shut down for an entire weekend. They can't enjoy what they're creating, and they don't want to have to keep sacrificing their health for the growth of their business. So I get a lot of people coming for burnout and pain in that regard. And then I get a lot of people come for disordered eating. I have a food freedom program where we work specifically on that, since it's something that I'm so deeply connected to. And then other people just come because they want to maintain the longevity of their health as they age. And so they want to stay strong and resilient. And we've all been under a lot of stress over the past 2 to 3 years with the pandemic, with so much change, with financial insecurity and social changes. And so people just want some help in staying regulated and staying more resilient. So that's what we do. And I see people move out of patterns that they have held their entire life, and really, for the first time, start to experience a new way of being inside of their body. Some of the people who come to me for food freedom will message me about, like, for the first time, like going swimming in the ocean and just like laughing with joy, like the joy of a child, because for the first time, maybe since they can remember, they feel the water, they feel the sun on their skin. They're not sitting there with racing thoughts, abusing their body or comparing themselves to everybody else, or dissociated from their body so they can't feel life happening around them. And then from that place comes joy, comes play, comes relaxation, comes the ability to be alive in your life in an embodied way. And so it's really powerful to come back to the body and work with the nervous system.
Mm-hmm. What's one of the greatest things you've been taught by mentors in the past?
There's so many different things. Dr. Cobb is my mentor, as he's the founder of Z Health, the Applied Neurology Institute. And I have learned from him so much about how the nervous system is responsible for so much of our life experience, and really shifting my perspective to looking at everything as an output, and realizing one of the big things that he talks about is we try to create change at the level of the output, right? We tell people, like, pull your shoulders down, or eat this way, or act this way, but we're not looking at the input. What's the quality of the input coming in? So if we change the input coming in through the eyes, through the inner ear, through the body mapping system, then we can get a new output, rather than focusing on the output and just expecting that to change without changing the input first. So he really taught me and opened my eyes to this input-based way of creating change. And that was incredibly important for me. And then another one of my mentors, Melanie Weller, is a vagus nerve expert. And not only is she a brilliant physical therapist and vagus nerve expert, and taught me so much about how to decompress the vagus nerve and work that through the body, but she also practices cosmology in the body and looks at how all these patterns in nature and patterns of the universe present in your own body, and the relationship between that. And studying under her has just given me this incredible appreciation for how divine and miraculous our bodies are, and these beautiful patterns. And it's just a completely different way of looking at the body and looking at the internal systems that has given me a very different relationship to my body.
I love it. Wow. We're touching on the spirit. We often talk about the body, and we often talk about the mind, but who talks about the spirit? Who talks about the soul? And without it, we're a lump of cells on the ground, as I like to say. But with it, it maintains every chemical reaction. I read that there was 1,200 chemical reactions every second in every
amazing
of 30 trillion cells. And we're not even talking about the 30 trillion cells in our bodies, but 300 trillion cells in the microbiome in the body, which are actually symbiotically helping us to survive here. And, it's at the root level, God-given energy system. And it's a system, just like the cardiovascular system or the gastrointestinal.
That's right.
Systems at play, so the chakra systems and meridian systems where acupuncture functions and stuff. And one thing I've realized is through the fascial system, which is not talked about. And how by releasing that through therapies, then profound changes can happen in people's life. And
absolutely.
Like, propelling them forward on this journey so they can face those fears and these emotions. But I can definitely see where, your line of work comes and applied neurology comes, because people need help. Talking about this stuff is not enough. Counseling about this is not enough. And I would say maybe even the EMDR and the OEI therapies out there for trauma-based, which are phenomenal, they can shift people. But in between sessions, we need assistance. We need to be able to be aware, but also do simple things.
Yeah.
If we can train our nervous system like you're doing, then I think that's
and understand it better too, right? Like one of my greatest intentions is just to make people the expert of their own nervous system so that they can learn how to assess and reassess what works for them, because we're all so different. And so there's so many amazing modalities to bring the body into healing, just like you were talking about. And something may work really great for one person and not so great for another person. And, even with like EMDR, like certain eye movements, there may be other reasons why that is threatening to you. And so learning how to assess and reassess, how is my body responding to this? How is that intelligent system inside of me telling me that this modality is working for me or not working for me? And if people can just get a little bit of an education about how to work with their operating system, how to assess and reassess, then that really helps in finding the tools that they need to bring their body into their healing, to try all these different modalities, and to allow themselves to be like, hey, this one works, this one doesn't work for me.
I must ask, what's the writing on the T-shirt? I can read.
Well, I'm so glad that this is actually a T-shirt I just made. I just got it made, and it says, what happens in Vegas needs to be healed. And it's a picture of the guy with this vagus nerve. So I actually just created this shirt and got it printed out. So I have those on my website too.
Oh, that's cool. I just see what happened. And I've recently finished, I mentioned in the last podcast show, Bruce Perry's book with Oprah Winfrey, and it's What Happened to You. You probably read it.
Yes. I'm so glad Oprah's talking about all this. I love Oprah, and I was so excited to see that she's getting involved in this conversation about trauma and how it affects our life experience and our health.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the science is now here. It's just, yeah, I think the future of medicine is definitely going to be online. I think COVID has been a blessing in this sense, because it's forced our systems, our medical professions to realize we need to use modalities like IT to its absolute utmost, and to help and heal, because surely that's the whole point, doing this type of work, whether you're a surgeon or a cancer doctor or a pain doctor or a applied neurologist or a physiotherapist. We can use these tools, and it's simple things that people need to do. And I think more and more that I do these Zoom calls and talking to a wide range of professionals, it's across the board that people are using this domain, obviously. So yeah, I think the future's bright. I really think it is. And okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. We're going to jump forward here to the end of the century. 21st century pain solutions has been going on for 80 years.
Okay. We've really found some longevity here.
What do you think we're going to be? What do you think the potential is? Knowing what we know based on our world right now, what do you think the potential is for healing?
I believe that more and more we're going to understand our potential to be self-healers, and to know, to come back to a system that is more balanced between, these external systems that provide healing, which are sometimes necessary, right? And then our ability to remove the things that are keeping our body from doing what it naturally does, which is to heal, right? And that hopefully, as that happens, as we move more and more towards becoming self-healers and expanding our viewpoint, into what's possible, that I think our consciousness also expands. I think that for me, in healing my trauma, it really was an opening for me to not just heal, but to go back and address the beliefs, the patterns, the subconscious scripts that were holding me back, and expanded me spiritually and expanded my consciousness overall. So I believe that as collectively we move more into modalities of healing and learning how to heal ourselves and reconnect to the body, that there will also be an expansion of consciousness that comes from that. And I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, because I don't even know where my own consciousness is expanding to. I just know that they're very linked together. As I do the work of healing, I also move into this expansion in a different way of thinking. I think plant medicine might be a part of that. I think a lot of somatics and body processing. And I think a lot of examining what in our society is causing us to stay in states of dysregulation, and starting to question those structures that are keeping us sick.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love the idea of consciousness and the growth of consciousness. Always,
me too.
Souls and evolution and this path down the road. And everything that we're coming across is just a tool for us to expand through our experience. Well, listen, it's been fantastic to have you on tonight, to meet you.
Yes, it's been so great to talk to you.
Thank you. You give us some resources. How can people get a hold of you, work with you? That'd be great.
Yeah, the best place is to get started through my website, which is brainbased-wellness.com. And I have a free video series there that you can get, that teaches you 5 very simple neural exercises that you can start implementing right away. And it also teaches you just a little bit more how to assess and reassess what works for your own nervous system, a little bit more about what applied neurology is. It's very simple, very short, and it's a way to really start to feel the work in your own body and get started regulating yourself and using these tools right away. And so that's on my website, brainbased-wellness.com. I think it's always just better to start there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, everybody, I hope you've got that one written down, brainbased-wellness.com, and get going with some of these exercises. And if you want more help, reach out to Elisabeth. I'm sure there'll be connect button on that website, and you can certainly connect her. So thank you again so much. It's been great. And I look forward.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.